Welcome to Beyond the Powerline Road. Today I'd like to talk about the qualifications of being an elder. I know that most of you understand that if you go to 1 Timothy chapter 3 or you go to the book of Titus, you have the qualifications listed by Paul as he is talking to Timothy and Titus. And we normally don't have a bit of a problem with the understanding of it. I think 1 Timothy chapter 3, every version I have read, there is a vast agreement on that. And we get to Titus, and there are some nuances in the book of Titus that I would like to cover today. I will be going from one version of the Bible to the next. In fact, I'm going to be looking at 4 versions of the Bible dealing with Titus. And I'm looking at Titus verse 6 all the way through verse 10. And I want to discuss the concepts of being an elder, having children raised in subjection at home, but when the children leave the family, are they still followers of Christ? And that is a big discussion in many of the Christian churches. I will be using today the New King James Version, the Modern English Version, the New Catholic Version, and the English Standard Version, just in case anyone wants to follow along. And I'm looking at Titus. We're going to start in verse 6. It says, "If a man is blameless, a husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dispensation or insubordination. For a bishop must be blameless, as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word of he that has been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convict those who contradict. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision." And of course I could go on, but I'm looking at New King James Version in this case, and I want to go back to verse 6. It says, "If a man is blameless, and the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dispensation or insubordination." And then we go down to verse 10, and it says, "There are many insubordinate." Now, are these insubordinate outside of the church? Are these insubordinate among the church? Are these insubordinate those children of the elders-to-be that have fallen away? So we all agree insubordination could be with children. I mean, little children, faithful little children. I mean, 12 years old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, we know how teenagers are. They can be insubordinate. Capable of dispensation, maybe that might be a little bit of a stretch. So as I go from one version to the next, I am going to be looking at verse 6 and verse 10, and we will see that there is kind of a relationship between verse 6 and verse 10. Now, in some of the translations, the inability of a person to behave, or the terminology is kind of a weak terminology for misbehavior, and sometimes it is a very strong terminology for misbehavior. I will show you by the time we get done. Next version is Modern English Version. Verse 6, "If any man is blameless, a husband of one wife, having faithful children who are not accused of being wild or unruly. For an overseer must be blameless, a steward of God, not self-willed, not easily angered." And as it continues on, you get to verse 10, and it says, "For there are many unruly men, empty talkers and deceivers." So back to the children and the terminology. The translation for the faithful children are accused of being wild or unruly. Now, when we're looking at wild and unruly, that makes sense for little children. That really does. Seems kind of interesting that the term unruly is also referred to as men in verse 10. And I want you to think back about the first century. Jesus was a carpenter. Why was Jesus a carpenter? Because Joseph was. It's a family of carpenters and more than likely masonaries, because of the fact that I'm sure they did a lot of carving of stones, not just cutting of trees. But if you think about what happened with most families at the time, there would be a household where the son would go out, claim a wife, and they would prepare for that wife to come and live with the son once the son built onto the house. So you may have had 3 or 4 sons building onto the house in the same property because of the fact that the families were very close knit. So if a young man, married young man even, was unruly, then it reflected unkindly onto the father. Let us go to the New Catholic Version. I sometimes get a kick out of this because of the fact that the Catholic Version talks about what we all expect is that a bishop must be a husband of one wife. So remember, bishop and overseer and elder are all synonymous terms. So it says, for each man must be blameless and a husband of only one wife, having children who are believers and free from any suspicion of licentiousness. I can't even pronounce that word. Let me spell it to you. Licentious, or rebellious behavior. And then we go on to verse 10. Well, I'll continue reading. In verse 7, it says, for his role as God's steward or bishop must be blameless. He must be not arrogant or quick-tempered or prone to drunkenness or violent or viscous. Rather, he must be hospitable, a lover of goodness, prudent, upright, devout, self-controlled. In addition, he must hold firmly to the authentic message that he has been taught, that he may be able to both to exhort and sound doctrine and refute those who contradict it. It says, for there are many rebellious people, especially among the Jewish converts. So we go back to verse 6 again. Man, husband of one wife, children who are believers and are not of rebellious behavior. Verse 10, there are many rebellious people. Now, I could be very, very, very wrong in my understanding of this, and I encourage you all to study this and study it well because of the fact that it really needs to be studied. But in the Old Testament, because of the fact that the children more than likely did not stray too far from home, I truly believe those children needed to be in subjection. They needed that patriarchal standard, if you will, that patriarchal foundation where I don't care how old the child was, the child needed to follow the faith of the father. And of course I'm saying the child needed to follow the faith of the father if the father were to be considered an elder. Now my family, my father who has passed, my brother and I all believe this, but we seem to be among the minority. So if you have reason to explain to me other than just looking at the book of Timothy and try to explain that yes, indeed, the qualifications of the elder are only with children in the household, I am more than willing to listen. Okay, so we're looking now at the English Standard Version. The English Standard Version says, if anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, and his children are believers, and not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. Okay, I am going to stop right there for a minute. Debauchery. You guys know what the definition of debauchery is? Here's the definition that you find on Google. Extreme indulgence in sexual pleasure, orgies, seduction from morality, allegiance, or duties. So basically what happens here is we're looking at a very adult term. You will not have an 8-year-old that is going to be guilty of debauchery. So you're going, or insubordination. So as we go down, and we see that verse 10 says, "For there are many who are insubordinate, empty talkers, deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party." And it goes on. So the verse 6 now talks about children as if they're adults. And the term insubordination is found in both verse 6 and verse 10. Now, here's my concern, is that a good number of church groups have fallen away from their understanding of the Bible and have fallen away from much of their understanding of beliefs because of the fact that many of them, if they are to establish bishops, some of them don't even care whether they're married or not. Some of them don't care whether there are children that they raised. And of course, I could go to a verse that says, if you can't raise your own children successfully, how can you lead the church of the Lord? So, bad paraphrase, but you can go to Timothy and find that. So, when we are looking for leaders of the church, when we are looking for elders, oh yes, those men must be married, husband of one wife, not one wife at a time. I think we all agree on that. Husband of one wife. They must have had children, and those children must be raised appropriately. Now, what happens if you have an elder that's children are raised well, and 10 years later, and the elder is still an elder of a church, one of the child falls away? That is my question for you today. Have a wonderful day.